The 649th edition of the Four Corners podcast starts right now.
This is the Four Corners podcast.
Elton ready on his second attempt. That one is no good. They battle for it. Loose ball. Recovered Marvin. He scores. 17 seconds left. And he was fouled. Here we go. Lawson with a runner. No. The rebound. Hansbrough at the gun. Got it.
They were 4 for 24.
Hansbrough on a switch on Paulus. A deep three. And Green rips down the rebound in traffic. 4-on-1.
What a great job. What a terrific job in transition. I mean, you couldn't plan that any better as a coach.
Tipped away by Johnson. It's loose. Page. Johnson.
They're dancing in the arms. They're high-fiving. They're celebrating. They're going bananas on Franklin Street.
Pass to Britt, 15 seconds to play. Up high to Page, gets a screen from Meeks. Page driving in on the left, high off the glass for two. Louisville with 7 seconds. Jones has it, goes left corner, Black's here for three. Back iron, 1 second to play, stick up, no! Carolina wins it! The Tar Heels win it! 72-71. 6 seconds to go. Pinson comes front court. Pinson to May for the win. Got it! Luke May! He got it! 0.3 of a second! Luke May gives Carolina the 75-73 lead. Are you kidding me?
Inside 30 overall. Love, top of the key. Oh! Big time delivery.
Here are your hosts, Josh Marlowe and Anthony Pagnotta.
Hello and welcome into another edition of the Four Corners podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services. Josh and Anthony here once again, here to recap Carolina's 91-69 win over Notre Dame as they ended the 2-game losing streak and they bounced back in a really big way. And we're here to talk about that. We'll take a look at the box score. You'll hear quotes from Hubert Davis and from Caleb Wilson after the win last night. We'll give you our stat of the game, more thoughts, more takeaways, including handing out our game balls at the end of the episode. But let's go ahead and jump right into it. We haven't had a win to talk about and what feels like forever, but we got one to talk about today. As Carolina, as I mentioned, they take down Notre Dame last night, 91-69 in the Smith Center to improve to 15-4 on the year and get back to 500 in ACC play. Carolina's record is 3-3, officially 1/3 through the conference slate. They were led by their two best players, Caleb Wilson and Henry Vassar. Wilson had a 22.7 rebound, 5 assist performance. Vassar added a 15.12 rebound double-double. It was, I believe, the 13th game Caleb Wilson has scored 20 points or more, and it was the 10th double-double for Henry Vassar in his Carolina career. The Heels tied a school record, having 8 different players hit at least one three-pointer on a night where Carolina shot the ball well from the outside. They were 13 of 34 from behind the arc to improve to 12-0 at home, where their average margin of victory is 22.2 points per game. We talked about going in, Notre Dame was not good. They have now lost 5 straight. A big reason why, they've been without their best player, Marcus Burton, something that I failed to make known when we previewed the game with the availability report, stuff like that. Those mistakes should not happen, but it did happen. And I'm here to tell you that I'm sorry and we'll be better. Full transparency, I've watched Notre Dame play since November, since the Players Era Festival when Marcus Burton was on the court. But he was on the court last night, and I don't think it would have mattered with the way that Carolina played. I think they still would have won the game and won the game rather comfortably. We were looking for this team to bounce back. We were looking for this team to get back on track, and they did so last night. on their way to a 22-point win in a game that was all but over by the early minutes of the second half.
Yeah, I mean, it was a win that you needed. I think that was certainly something that you can acknowledge. But, I mean, yeah, it's against a team that's incredibly shorthanded. If we're being honest, might be one of the worst, if not the worst team in the entire ACC without Marcus Burton. So, I think it's kind of what you expected from Carolina, what we would expect from Carolina with the expectations that we had coming into the season, with the expectations that we had, coming out of the Kansas game. But at the same time, you do have to sort of look at this now and say, well, you were coming off 2 losses. You needed to respond at home. We've seen some games where Carolina has, been a little bit inconsistent, in terms of the types of blowout wins that they've had. They've had some games where, they've allowed a team like Navy to stick around for a while. They have games even like Florida State, where Florida State never really went away. This was a dominant performance from Carolina. So they deserve to be applauded for that. There's no doubt about that. But at the same time, you do have to, look at it and say that you're going to face much better competition in the ACC the rest of the season. I think the biggest thing that we saw that was a difference from what we were seeing previous to this was the defensive effort. That was what was so much different. And we'll of course talk about it here throughout this edition of the podcast, but that was really where everything started. You needed to see that effort on the defensive end of the floor from this group, that energy that they needed to play with, a little bit of urgency, too, because you were 5 games into the conference season, you were 2-3. So I think you needed to see that level of urgency to say, hey, we need to get this thing back on track, and we need to get it back on track right now. And I thought you saw that last night. I think you saw the energy from Hubert Davis as well. After, we talked about on the West Coast, it seemed like, especially in that Cal game, there were moments where he just wasn't even engaged in the game. Not even, maybe that's a little bit harsh, but it felt like the fire and the passion that we normally see from him just wasn't necessarily there. I guess that is kind of what happens when you're down 20, but it is what it is. You still want to see your coach, especially when you've got a chance to come back into the game, be very involved. And I thought last night you saw that on the sidelines. You saw him animated. He was into the game. And I think that they did everything that they needed to do against Notre Dame. It's going to be, how do you carry that over? But this was a really, really solid win for Carolina to sort of get them back on track and continue what's been a lot of success in the Smith Center.
And look, it started from the very first defensive possession that, was highlighted by a Seth Trimble block of a shot that went out of bounds, where he did a really good job recovering, made the right move over to take away the shot. And it just felt like, for the most part, Carolina was where they needed to be. There were still some defensive lapses in the first half. I'll talk about those here a little bit later on. But for the most part, the energy was there. The effort was there. And while they didn't full court press and they didn't play with the same style they did in the at the end of the Cal game, we talked so much about bottling that up and carrying it over. And it felt like that effort that we saw when Carolina made that comeback that fell short was there from the moment the game started up until the game pretty much got out of hand. There was about a 4 or 5 minute stretch there where it felt kind of YMCA-ish, but Carolina had built a 25, 27-point lead. And that's going to happen. But outside of that, was really pleased with the way Carolina played last night. They got to do it more consistently. They got to do it against better competition. They got to earn some trust back. But I was pleased with a lot of things that I saw last night, and that's what makes me so excited to sit here and talk about last night's win. Let's go ahead, pull up the box score for you guys looking back at home. It's a pretty one for Carolina. Carolina shoots, as I give you the wrong box score, I'll just pull that down, but Carolina shoots 51% from the game. They were 31 of 61 from the field. They held Notre Dame to just 36% shooting. The Irish were 27 of 65. Mentioned Carolina's three-point shooting. The Heels, 13 of 34 from deep. That equates to 38%. They were shooting in the upper 40s for the majority of the game. On the flip side, you saw the perimeter defense where you're used to seeing at Notre Dame, just 8 of 25 from three. That works out to just 32%. So Carolina +5 in that category, the first time in a long time. I feel like they've been a plus in that area of the box score. Free throw shooting, still a struggle for Carolina, just 16 of 23 for 70%, but Notre Dame was just 7 of 13 from the foul line. Neither team turned it over a lot. Carolina 8 turnovers. That led to 2 points for Notre Dame. Carolina forced 5 turnovers and scored 7 points off of them. A lot of rebounds. Carolina was +5 on the glass, 44-39. They won the defensive glass 34-21, but they were out-rebounded on the offensive glass 18-10. The good thing about it was Carolina did not get killed on the second chance points. Despite having 8 fewer offensive rebounds, Carolina +4 in that category, 17-13. Both teams had some bench production. Notre Dame did have the edge, 36-35. Points in the paint went Carolina's way, 32-30. Fast break point, 15-2. Blocks went in favor of Carolina, 5-0. Steals went in favor of Notre Dame, 5-3. But Carolina had 18 assists on 31 made baskets. Notre Dame 13 assists on their 27 made baskets. And Carolina led for a commanding 38 minutes and 27 seconds. Let's now get to the quotes of the game, because I got 2 quotes that I think really is the biggest talking point that we'll get to when we get also into our discussion topic. But there was a moment in the Cal game where I remember just reading through the tweets through the game where, and I believe it was Shelby Swanson who tweeted it out, that there was a huddle where the only person talking was Caleb Wilson. He had pretty much taken over the huddle. And some people can look at that in whatever way you want to look at it. I think in this era of college college athletics, I think when you have a player-led team as opposed to a coach-led team, you feel a lot better about your chances for competing for whatever your goals are. And Caleb Wilson is this team's best player, but had not really emerged as a vocal leader. That's something, though, that changed in that Cal game leading up to the game last night. And Hubert Davis talked about that in his post-game press conference.
Somebody that stepped up dramatically in that space in leadership was Caleb. I mean, he last couple days, including tonight, he's one of the guys that was more vocal in practice, more vocal. Right before we went out for warm-ups for the game, I said my last words before we went out to the floor. He said, "Coach, can I say something?" And he went after the team. He said, let's go out there and compete. He's never done that before. And so I really like that from him.
So really good sign that Carolina first they have found their vocal leader. I think Henry Visar is more of their emotional leader because he plays with such a competitive spirit. I don't know how much of a vocal leader that he is, but you need both. You need an emotional leader and you need a vocal leader. The biggest issue with the team last year was your best player wasn't vocal. RJ Davis was a leader in his own way, but it wasn't verbally expressed to the other 13, 14 guys on the roster. This was something that I think was always going to happen for Carolina to ultimately reach their ceiling, was for their best player to emerge as their vocal leader. No, he's not the point guard, but he is the extension of Hubert Davis on the floor. He is the extension of the head coach, and evidence of that is that whenever things have gone sideways and things have gone wrong, Caleb Wilson's been the first man to come to the defense of his head coach, and he did so last night when he told the media, "Hey, when we play bad, don't blame the coaches. It's fair for y'all to blame us."
I think it was definitely a conscious effort, but it's more like about pride with us now. Like, our coach can say whatever you want. I hate the people that try to blame Hubert for our lapses, but our coach is teaching us the right things. It's all about our effort and us playing as hard as we can. Coach can only do so much. We're out there playing, so as long as we pick up and play with pride and put a lot of effort, we'll get the results we got today.
Kind of some Armando Bacot, I think, in that answer. Bacot, I think, was always coming to the defense of Hubert. even though the ups and downs were maybe weren't as I guess high or as low as they've been here the last couple of years. But you see that last night. I thought it was the biggest takeaway I took from Hubert Davis's press conference. You then see that quote of Caleb Wilson pretty much coming to the defense because, for as much as, he gets told to not be on social media, ignore all sideshow distractions, we know he has a social media presence, and there's no way that he couldn't have logged on to Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, or whatever and seen the noise. And so I thought it was a neat moment that you see Hubert Davis talking about the leader that Caleb Wilson is emerging as, but also Caleb Wilson coming to the defense of his head coach after a week and a half of a lot of negativity around his future as Carolina's head basketball coach.
Yeah, I mean, you do like to see him coming to the defense of Hubert because that means that there isn't the disconnect in the locker room that we were questioning whether or not there was. And for good reason. I mean, when things just aren't sinking in with guys, it really does make you wonder, is there a problem with, Hubert's leadership style? Is there something that is just not sitting right with these guys? But that doesn't necessarily seem to be the case. It seems like, this group really does have respect for Hubert Davis. It's just, I don't know, maybe they went through a lull, or maybe it is, something that is going to be an identity to this team. We're going to have to find that out as they go further along. But I do like the fact that he said, look, you got to put some of the blame, or you got to put the blame on us. And now I don't believe that all of the blame should go on the players. We talked about it when we were recapping the games against Cal and Stanford. Part of it is on the coaching staff for not having these guys prepared, for not making certain adjustments, for not going to, the trap, the 1-2 full court trap a little bit earlier, stuff like that. So it's not all on the players, but the players do deserve a little bit of the blame here. We have talked about, when you watch some of the film that Terrence Oglesby is breaking down, one of the things that I noticed a lot is there's a lot of ball watching, man. There are a lot of times where guys are worried more about the guy handling the ball than the guy that they are supposed to be defending. And one guy that has been really bad with it at times has been Caleb Wilson. And so I do think that that's something that, we're going to have to watch moving forward, whether or not, Carolina, this game was really the turning point, or if Carolina is still going to have some of those issues. But I like him, coming out and saying some of the stuff that he's starting to say. It seems like he's just becoming more comfortable. I mean, the fact that he's gotten to a point where he feels like he, has to speak up and say something in a huddle in the game against Cal, and then in the pregame in this game against Notre Dame, that's what you love to see. It takes some time to get to that point because it's all about confidence. You got to know that your team is going to be able to respond to you. And after a while, he probably just got to the point where Caleb said, this is ridiculous. We've got nobody that's really a vocal leader on this team. We need someone to step up, and this is the time of the year where, that person has to emerge. And so he has done that here in these last couple of games. I'm glad that Carolina has that vocal leader because, as we talked about last year, that was a big part of the reason why Carolina wasn't successful last year. Look, maybe there were moments where RJ Davis did say stuff, but it really didn't sink home, apparently, with some of the guys on that roster. We're going to have to see how much this sinks in with guys on this roster, but I'm just glad that you've got someone that is outwardly vocal and that we're starting to see communicate how he's feeling, communicating, what the demands of playing at Carolina are. And I think that's certainly something that we're going to see continue to evolve over the next handful of games here, starting with the game on Saturday against Virginia.
Let's get to the stat of the game. I wrote down second half 3-point field goals. Carolina just 6 of 17 in the second half. That equates to just 35%. But Notre Dame was 2 of 13 from 3 in the second half. After shooting 6 of 12, they were shooting 50% from the 3. It was the biggest reason why the game was as close as it was. Carolina led by 9 at the break. They used an 8-0 run to start the second half to effectively put the game away. And I guess what was most concerning is 5 of the 6 threes, depending on how critical you want to be, you could basically assess were mistakes made by Carolina. I thought Trevor William Marks did a really good job. He does some film study for Inside Carolina, and he sent a tweet out that I wanted to go over, detailing that the 6 threes that Carolina gave up in the first half. The first one, there was a ghost screen action, which was a botched switch between Derek Dixon and Caleb Wilson, so a mistake over Carolina. The second was a contested 3 made over Zayden High, so that one contested Carolina in the right spots, just a guy made a shot. The third 3, Jonathan Powell ball watches, doesn't react fast enough to his assignment, gives up a catch and shoot 3, so that's a mistake against Carolina. The fourth 3 was in transition. Caleb Wilson tried to take the rim runner. Vassar did not get back to the trailer. The trailer left wide open. That's a mistake made by Carolina. The fifth 3 was a ball screen action where Powell went to tag the screen, but there's a skip pass thrown as he's stepping over, and that ball goes into the corner for a 3. So depending on how you want to read into that one, you could still argue Carolina did not do the right thing there defensively. And then the last one was a dribble handoff guarded by Caleb Wilson, Henry Vassar. A lot of action we've seen here the last 2.5 weeks. Caleb Wilson goes under the screen. Vassar playing that drop coverage, gives up a pick and pop 3. So you're sitting there in the first half, and I was, trying to do the media thing, trying to be professional. And when you see some of those mistakes, it's just concerning. It's just alarming, because had you not learned your lesson? Did what happened against Cal, what happened against Stanford, was that not big enough of a wake-up call? You're on pace to give up double-digit made threes for, feels like, the 10th straight game, and could allow a team that was undermanned to hang around a lot longer than they should have been. But I thought in the second half, you saw Carolina clean up a lot of things defensively. Thought the communication was better. Thought the closeouts were better, so on and so forth. Because, like Hubert Davis says, when you allow a team to shoot 60% from the field, you're helping them shoot such a great percentage. When you force a team, though, to shoot 15% from the field, you have to be doing some things better defensively. And I thought you really saw in that second half Carolina get back to the perimeter defense we saw back in the non-conference season, which was a big reason why Notre Dame was not able to really get themselves back in the game from the outside.
Yeah, it was much better in the second half than it was coming into the after that first half. I mean, really, I think they did a decent job through most of the first half, but those 2 late threes, that was really what got you a little bit frustrated, because they were, the drop coverage, you end up getting a pick and pop 3 that was pretty wide open. And all of a sudden we're saying, here we go again. This is going to be the story of the second half. And you wondered, you're up by 9. You still felt pretty comfortable with where you were at, but you thought to yourself, did they find some sort of rhythm there at the end of the half? Will they come out, and will this be a game that could be somewhat like the Wake Forest game? And in the second half, the defensive intensity picked up even more. I will say, as critical as we are about what they did in the first half, allowing some of those threes, I don't think it was because of a lack of intensity. I think it was more a lack of communication. I think that was really one of the big issues, and we've talked about that. That's been one of the big issues that they've had on the defensive side, is that they just don't communicate at certain times. And it's like, look, especially if you're going to be a switch-heavy team, you've got to be great at communication. That's verbal and nonverbal, as Joel Berry said in his tweet that he had earlier in the week. I think we've seen, in the second half, we saw things evolve a little bit. Carolina was communicating much better, and they just did a really good job of running them off the 3-point line. Now, part of it could be, you could say, well, maybe Notre Dame was just settling for a lot of shots. Doesn't matter. Even if Notre Dame's going to settle for a lot of those shots, that's the thing that you're wanting them to do if you're Carolina, because your 2-point field goal percentage allowed is one of the best in all of college basketball. You can defend the paint relatively well. You can defend the mid-range game relatively well. Your problem is you cannot defend the 3. And You could say whatever you want about this team. I know they were without Marcus Burton. This was a team that came in shooting 36% from beyond the arc. Braden Shrewsbury was the best three-point shooter in the conference, according to percentage. Cole Serta not too far behind him, shooting 38%. This was a team that looked like it had the recipe to be dangerous against Carolina. Carolina took them out of what they wanted to do, and that's a big part of the reason that they won this game. They should be applauded for what they did last night.
And look, with all the issues they had out west, with Cal and Stanford both bringing Wilson and Visar out of the painted area, it's going to be really important that the communication is there, but also that the floor positioning is better. And I thought Visar for the most part was in better position last night, was not playing too far back to where he could still recover, contest, and try to alter shots. I know Marcus Page, said on the radio broadcast the other week that, look, we're a no paint team. They want to protect the paint, but with the way that the game is being played and your struggles defending the perimeter, that's where teams are going to attack. And so you got to be mindful of that. And look, 2 to 3 feet at this level is a big difference. Shooting's too good now to give some of these guys that extra space, even if they're shooting 2 to 3 feet further from behind the three-point line. You've got to be able to contest those shots, and I thought Carolina did a much better job of that in the second half. Let's get into more thoughts, more takeaways from the 91-69 win over Notre Dame last night in the Smith Center. The first thing, something that I don't know if we necessarily predicted to happen, but we talked a lot about it, was that we wanted to see more of a three-guard lineup from Carolina, and that's how Hubert Davis started the game. So back-to-back games, you see a lineup change. Into the starting lineup goes Jaden Young, Jared Stevenson back to the bench. So your starting five was Derek Dixon, Jaden Young, Seth Trimble, Caleb Wilson, Henry Visar. And Dixon was really, really solid last night. 11 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists against 1 turnover in his 27 minutes, was 4 of 6 from the field, 3 of 5 from 3. Young and Trimble, quiet night scoring. They combined to score just 8 points. But, I sent a tweet out that when I sent out my initial reactions tweet, and if you want to see that every night, you can follow me at HTB_Josh on Twitter. I thought Jaden Young, despite not putting the ball in the basket, you felt his presence on both ends. One, you add another shooter to the floor, which creates better floor spacing. And look at the 3 that he made. The ball just kind of trickles his way to him in the corner, and he's able to catch and shoot for 3. But he's also willing to defend. He's going to get in a stance. He's going to put some pressure on the ball, and Carolina needs that. Hubert has harped about that the last 2.5 weeks. I think the biggest thing that it does, and it didn't show up in the box score last night, it creates a mismatch for Seth Trimble at the 3, because how many threes can handle his speed and his athleticism? And look, I think Hubert Davis wants to play with more guards on the floor. He's talked about that since he became Carolina's head coach. I don't know why we've been so reluctant to get to this point, but I look at that lineup and I think what it does, having those 3 guys on the floor. You've got 3 ball handlers. You've got 2 really strong, capable outside shooters, because Derek Dixon is starting to shoot the ball really, really well. I think the more Jaden Young shoots it, the better he's going to shoot it. But look at what your bench now is comprised of. Kyan Evans, who looked a lot more comfortable, a lot more confident coming off the bench last night. Same thing with Luka Bogovac. So now you've got two creators that can come off the bench. There's not the pressure for them to put up big numbers as starters. And Jared Stevenson's coming off the bench. So now you just naturally look and feel a lot deeper than you are when all those guys are in the starting lineup and you're not getting the scoring punch off the bench. What did you make of the lineup change? Because, Hubert was kind of non-committal about it carrying over into the game at Virginia, said that he went with that lineup because that was a lineup he felt played the best down the stretch at Cal. But I'm looking at this, and I know I was a big Jaden Young fan back when he signed as a transfer in the offseason. But I could see that becoming the lineup that Carolina starts games with every game here moving forward.
Yeah, I could see it. I mean, especially for now. I mean, if it's something that becomes ineffective, well, then yeah, you're going to switch up the starting lineup. You're going to go with whatever lineup you think gives you the best chance to win games and to start out fast. I really thought that was the right move last night. And again, I think one of the things that he does by doing that is that you probably send another message. I mean, honestly, you probably send another message to the rest of these guys that, hey, if you want to play, you're going to have to put in the effort on the defensive end of the floor. I know Jaden Young isn't perfect, but Jaden Young is a guy that is showing you that effort on the defensive end of the floor. He's been doing some good things off of the bench for Carolina and really progressing. And, you know, the thing is that he was a guy that started last year at Virginia Tech. So it's not like it's foreign to him. It's not like this was the first time in his career that he started. He was brought in, and it was a bit of an unknown role, what exactly he would be. I mean, yeah, maybe he is a guy that comes out and is a significant part of the bench. You know, maybe he was a guy that we thought could, you know, eventually find maybe his way into the starting lineup if things broke right. But we also, you know, at times when he wasn't playing earlier in the season due to a coach's decision, I don't think we were really all that shocked with that either. I mean, this was a guy that was committed to play at High Point or was trending in that direction before he eventually committed to Carolina. So I think he was one of those mysteries that you got in the transfer portal, and now it's really paying off. And I think you're right. One of the things that we probably, and the reason why I think they were afraid to go to this, mainly Hubert Davis was afraid to go to this, was because last year when you played so small, teams were able to take advantage of you. And I think this year, one of the things that he really liked about his team, and he said this, is that he loves the positional size. It's just a difference for Carolina. And he was worried probably about going to someone at that 3 spot that is as small as Seth Trimble. But I think it works because, as you said, it creates those mismatches on the offensive end. I think Seth Trimble is good enough to be able to handle himself against either a 3 guard or a wing player at that 3. I think he's going to be perfectly fine handling either one of those, because you're not playing guys that are nearly as quick off the dribble. You're not playing guys that are, you know, nearly going to be able to have the impact going to the rim that we saw some of the other guys, where it just seems like there are times where he's just not able to stay in front of certain guys. I think we have to admit that at this point, as hard as it is to admit, because we raved about how good of a defender he was, that's just not necessarily there. So I think it creates some mismatches. I think, again, it sent a great message to this team. And the good news is they responded to that. They got off to a pretty good start. So if it is something that's going to work, well, yeah, let's keep that in place for the game against Virginia. And let's say they come out against Virginia and it's just a complete flop. And, you know, it's ugly early on. Well, you can make a switch early. Like, if you really notice that it's not working, I'm not saying, you know, 30 seconds into the game, but if you notice, hey, within the first, you know, 2-3 minutes of the game, Virginia's racing out to a 4-7 point lead, something like that. You know what? It's very simple. Call timeout, put some other guys in there, and you can adjust from there. So I think this is perfectly fine for them to roll with moving forward. I think Jaden Young probably deserves it, even though the other day wasn't his greatest performance. And I think as you said, it really does help with the bench group that had a successful night for Carolina last night.
Well, and also with Jaden Young in the starting lineup, and with Derek Dixon now, I think it's safe to say he's going to be Carolina's starting point guard. Your 3 guards consist of 6'5", 6'4". Okay, and Trimble is 6'3". So you've had Luka Bogovac playing that position, who is 6'6", and then you've had Jaron Stevenson playing the 3 at certain points, 6'11". So especially when you look at it from the Stevenson angle, okay, you are sacrificing some size and some length. But you know what you are at that 3 spot with Trimble there? You're more athletic.
Yeah.
You're quicker. You're faster. You're more explosive. And he can do some things offensively that Luka Bogovac can't do. Jared Stevenson can't do. So, we all love look, size matters, length matters. And I don't want to. I love that Carolina can play big, and I love that Carolina can really be impactful with their length. They should be. They're not. They don't force turnovers nowhere near as much as the length on the roster would suggest. The athleticism is the biggest thing, because how many times have we seen Luka Bogovac just get beaten by his man or not be able to do some things in the half court, fighting through screens, so on and so forth? Trimble gives you that. And so I think this needs to be a lineup that, he needs to be committed to until, frankly, they give him a reason not to be. Let's talk about Caleb Wilson, talk about Henry Vassar here really quickly. Big Henry, another double-double, his 10th at Carolina, 15 and 12. Just I thought was really steady last night, was 6 of 10 from the field. Did leave some points at the foul line, but had that 15 and 12 double-double in just 28 minutes. And then Caleb Wilson was the best player on the floor. He gets his 22 on 8 of 11 shooting, gets 7 rebounds, 5 assists, hits a 3, 5 of 8 from the line. So you can maybe nitpick that if you want to. But I was talking about this on air this morning with the morning show, and then when I was on in the middays as well. The thing that impressed me the most from being there in person, I thought he controlled the game with his passing. And when players start to do that, that's when you elevate yourself into a different category of player. Whenever you can impact the game in a positive way without you specifically putting the ball in the basket, that's how you know you're dealing with a special player. And look, the turnaround jump shot would suggest that he's special. The spin baseline away from a double team would suggest that he's special. But the passing out of the double teams, making the right reads, putting the ball where the ball needs to get to. I mean, the cross-court pass he saw was tremendous, just to be able to have the vision and then be able to make the pass. It's evidence why their whole entire offense can function through him. I know some people are worried, the assist production is declining from your guards. Well, that's what happens when you make a point guard change, and Derek Dixon is more of a shooter than he is of a passer. But Caleb Wilson's proven, man, since that he's come a long way from when you go back and watch his double teams against Michigan State to where he is now. He's a different player. I think he feels them. I think he anticipates them. I think he knows when to force it. I think he knows when to pass it. And it feels like every time he's making the right read. And so for a guy that, we've raved so much about his ability to score, defend, rebound, so on and so forth, I thought last night his best attribute was his passing. And when you start talking about a player controlling a game with his passing, that's how you know you're talking about some all-time greatness. And there's no doubt that's what this kid has.
Yeah, I mean, especially when it's coming out of a forward spot. I mean, when you're doing that, I mean, that's really special stuff. And, this is the reason why we were so frustrated that they weren't getting him the ball at the end of the Stanford game, at the end of the Cal game. Because, guys, when he touches the ball, there are good things that happen. That's why we're saying, why are you not giving this guy the ball? Why are you basically not forcing the ball into his hands and allowing him to create something? And I get it. I mean, look, there are teams that are going to be better defensively than Notre Dame. Notre Dame's not a great defensive team. But at the same time, I mean, the teams that you were facing, I mean, this wasn't Virginia under Tony Bennett that you were playing. It wasn't that level of defense. You're not playing Houston. So that's the thing, is you just want to get the ball in his hands because he can do so many different things for you. And last night was just a great example of that. I mean, the ability to score the ball is great. And that's what you're looking for from him. And he's always, we've gotten to the point now where we know you can basically count on this dude to give you 18 to 20 points a night. And it's hard to feel like there have been any other freshmen really outside of Tyler Hansborough that we've watched that have been able to do that. And that's what's so special. That's why we like watching this dude so much, is because he's such a reliable player. You just have to give him the ball in those situations and allow him to go to work. I thought last night the passing was great. Rebounding wasn't as crazy as it's been at certain times this year, but still 7 rebounds, a couple on the offensive end of the floor, still very impactful there. And then efficient from the field, 8 of 11 from the field. That's what you like to see from Caleb Wilson. And then with Henry, Henry was another guy that in the first half, got off to a little bit of a slow start. Only had 3 points in that first half, was 1 of 4 from the field. But the thing is that he was impacting the game with his rebounding. 7 rebounds, 6 of them on the defensive end. That was really big for Carolina. But then the second half, what we've been seeing him do, and this is something that I think we haven't really talked enough about during this stretch here, is that he's a dude that really has started to show up in these second halves, where Caleb is the dude that really dominates the first half, really sets the tone. And then, last night, 8 points in the second half, 4 of 5 from the field. You're not going to argue with that for Caleb, but it's Henry leading the way with 12 points, 5 of 6 from the field in that second half. 5 rebounds, again, leads the team in rebounding in a half where they did not rebound the ball all that great in terms of, 15 defensive rebounds, as opposed to what was going on the other side, where there were 13 offensive rebounds given up in that second half. That's just crazy, but it shows you, how weird the game got at certain points. But still, this duo, we've talked about it. They are showing you they are the best in college basketball. Anytime that you question, they had a little bit of a slower night, they only combined to score, 35 points or whatever. Anytime that you start to say, well, is this a group that's not necessarily, or is this, the point where the teams start to figure them out, stuff like that. Every time that you wonder about that, they show back up. They put together a really strong game. So this duo really is the best in the country right now in the front court. And it's the reason why you should feel confident about Carolina offensively. It's just a question of what you feel defensively with some of the issues that they've had. But again, good showing in this game on that end of the floor. Now let's see if it carries over to the game against Virginia.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch one thing defensively, then we'll get to the final takeaway. We'll get to our discussion topic and get out of here. Don't want to spend too much time talking about a 22-point win over Notre Dame. But Carolina, they got back on track. It looked like the defense that we saw the first 2 months of the year, pretty much up until the Christmas break. And the stats would suggest that Notre Dame just 36% shooting from the field, 32% shooting from the 3-point line, only 2 fast break points. Carolina did outscore them points in the paint. The offensive rebounds, you got to clean that up. 18's a pretty high number, but long shots equal long rebounds. And some of those offensive rebounds were late once the game was decided. But nonetheless, you get back to, you're allowing less than 75 points. And Carolina at home has just been tremendous. Opponents are shooting under 35% against Carolina in the Smith Center. Is now, finding this defensive energy, this defensive commitment, and making sure it's with you when you're not playing games in Chapel Hill. Did want to talk about the bench, though, because, they show up in a big way last night. You get 35 points from the bench, and we'll just kind of run through them here really quickly. You got 9 from Kyan Evans. You got 2 from Zayden High, 5 from Jonathan Powell, 8 from Jaron Stevenson, 9 from Luka Bogabats, and then, Elijah Smith added 2 there in the closing minutes. I feel like, we've harped a lot on Luka and Kyan not being the guys that we want them to be, what we need them to be, what we're paying them to be. But they looked a lot more comfortable last night. They looked a lot more confident. And I think you got to give those 2 kids a lot of credit because, in this day and age where both are getting paid, compensated very well, they could pout when they get benched and kind of check out and not try to do what's best for the team. It doesn't feel like on the surface that was the case. And then you see the ball go in the basket for Jared Stevenson, which is always, that's the icing on top of the cake for him, man, because you know what he can do as a defender. The man can pretty much guard the 3 through 5, and you feel comfortable with him out there. Solid rebounder. When he puts the ball in the basket, I think it elevates Carolina's ceiling. And then Jonathan Powell, a lot more minutes last night, played 19, scored 5 points, was seeking his shot, but also impacted the game with 3 rebounds and 3 assists. So that's another thing about that lineup that Hubert opted to roll out there. You've got a little bit more of a scoring punch coming off the bench. And you've got some versatility that how many teams could have a playmaker like Luka Bogovac coming off their bench? How many teams could have a guy like Jaron Stevenson and just how versatile he is? How many teams in the ACC have someone like him coming off the bench? We can sit here and criticize and chastise the rotation not being set, the rotation not being identified this deep into the season. You would have felt like that would have already been figured out, but it could have also been a blessing in disguise because you're not going to get that kind of production on a nightly basis from the bench. But with the lineups that you were running out beforehand with Evans and Bogovac in the starting lineup, you didn't have this type of scoring punch, this type of versatility coming off the bench. This may have been something that Carolina found here late in the season that could really pay dividends as this ACC schedule starts to heat up in a big way on Saturday when they go to Virginia.
Yeah, I think the name of the game now for Luka, for Kyan Evans, for Jaron Stevenson, just about being consistent, man. Can you give me some consistent production off of the bench? I don't doubt that this is a group that felt like the pressure was sort of off of them because they're not starters. I think that certainly is something, especially for Kyan Evans, that I think really helps him out. But this isn't the first game that we've seen Kyan come off the bench. The first game, he wasn't necessarily great. This game, he is. It's about finding that level of consistency because you need that the rest of conference play. If you can get, and I'm not expecting this every night, but you got 20 points from your point guard spot in this game. That is some high-level production for where Carolina has been at that spot. That is a really solid night. So if you can give Carolina that consistently moving forward, you feel pretty good about where they're ultimately at. Luka, not efficient, 2 of 9, but still scores 9 points. I like the aggression that he had last night. There were a couple of times where he could have, dribbled it back out, reset, everything like that. He decides, I'm going to take it right to the basket, gets to the foul line, and goes 4 for 4 at the foul line. Credit to him. That's a great job getting there and then making the most of your opportunities while you're there. And then Jaron Stevenson hitting 2 threes. That's huge. That's what you're hoping that you're going to get from him. The efficiency, he was 2 of 2 from 3. You're not going to hit 100% of the shots from the outside. You're not even going to hit 50%. But if you could be a guy that could shoot even 35% from beyond the arc, I think you're feeling good about where Jaron Stevenson is coming off the bench. Love the impact of Jonathan Powell. I was one of those dudes that's been pounding the table. Play this dude. Please put him on the court because when he's out there, he's incredibly effective. And I like that they used him last night. I don't think it's a coincidence that they had a better defensive performance with Jonathan Powell playing more minutes. I do think those two things are connected. And then one guy that we really don't talk about, but that we really have to credit for the last few games, Zayden High sort of settled himself down a little bit. Seems like he's playing a little bit more efficient basketball. It's not perfect, but I do think that he has been effective when he has come into the game against Cal and then when he came into the game last night. So I'm not pounding the table. I'm not saying, dude, put this guy in over Caleb Wilson, Henry Vassar. Oh, no, absolutely not. But I do think that you have to give him some credit. He's progressed as the season has gone along, and it's a reason why you're starting to feel more and more confident in this bench with every game that's played.
Yeah, I don't know if it was audible over the television or not. The best part about when Zayden Hyde checked in, he was the first man off the bench. There was a murmur that went through the Smith Center that could just kind of tell you because he's eccentric, man. Like there's some times he does some things and you never deny that he's playing hard, but he's got to learn how to play under control. But he has come a long way here, I think, in the last couple of weeks, and has given Carolina an option, and they need that because James Brown was out last night, so was Ivan Matlakovich, so they're kind of lacking depth at that backup big spot. So it's gonna fly under the radar, but his presence has been something that Carolina has called upon here the last handful of games. Let's get to our discussion topic before we hand out some game balls and get out of here. Look, there was a lot of I'm not going to say animosity, but I think some nerves going into last night's game. Where was Carolina going to be at mentally after a rough week out west? Hubert said in his post-game press conference that when they got back, they just wanted to leave what happened in California. Didn't want to bring that back with them and play with that burden, that disappointment. He was very he is honest. I was very encouraging, uplifting in practice. Probably wouldn't be the way I'd go about it. Probably the reason why my butt's not in coaching, because I don't know if people would receive the way that I would coach very, very well. There's no denying that it worked. There's also no denying that this team went to California without a leader. This team came back to California with someone who was on the verge of leadership, and that was Caleb Wilson, who Hubert also admitted spent a lot of time in his office in the 2 days leading up to the game. And he was talking about leadership and how it's different now. When Hubert was a freshman, I didn't talk because freshmen back then didn't have the role that they have now in college basketball. And I say all this to say this: if Caleb Wilson's going to emerge as a leader vocally, it's going to change the direction of Carolina's season, and it's going to do so for the better. And it almost makes you wonder, for as frustrating as it was, as disappointing as it was going 0-2 maybe a necessity for this team to find its voice and for their voice to come from their best player? Because if they go 2-0 and they just, and let's say they're winning games like they were against Wake Forest, I don't know, does anything change? I don't know. I reference it. There was the tweet we got during the California game about how he overtook the huddle. It was him in the huddle challenging his guys. It was him in the huddle communicating to his teammates. And it almost makes you wonder that if this season gets turned around and Carolina finishes top 4 in the ACC and they get a really respectable seed come selection Sunday, maybe we view that 0-2 stint in California a lot differently than we did when we were living it last week.
I would like to believe that that's the case, that there was something that was so great that came out of it. I don't know. I think we're going to have to wait and see. Is this something that really extends out over a period of time where, Caleb Wilson is the vocal leader that Carolina needs? Maybe they respond defensively, like they put out a really strong performance in this game against Virginia. And then all of a sudden we are looking back at this game and saying this, or the game against Cal, and saying that was the real turning point. That was the moment where things really started to turn, was you were being embarrassed by a team that should not have embarrassed you. And Caleb Wilson became the vocal leader. And from there, everything started to turn in the right direction. I think that's more than possible. And that was the thing, when we were sitting there last year and they came back from Maui, we were waiting for that moment. Would there be a moment where this team would respond? And we thought, man, there's so many games that they can respond to that. There's a game against Florida. There's a couple of games, to start conference play. They're going to find a way to respond. And they never did. This group, are they different? That's going to be the biggest thing, is, are they different? And I think that, Saturday's game's really going to show that a lot. If this team really is different, then they're going to go out there and put a real strong performance up against Virginia. Are they going to win? I'm not sure about that. I would like to say in order for it to have worked, then they have to win. But I do think that's a really tough place to play. We've seen how good Virginia is. Might be the second best team in the ACC. So we'll have to wait and see. But man, I wonder. I wondered the same thing a little bit last night. If maybe you look back at that moment, and especially now that you hear those comments from Hubert Davis, you hear the comments from Caleb Wilson, where it just seems like he's taking over that leadership role. Was that the moment where he really steps forward and becomes the leader? So hopefully that is the case. I feel like I have a decent level of confidence that was the moment, but I think we do have to see it play out over these next handful of games where Carolina, you're going up against Virginia, then you got two really winnable games against Georgia Tech and Syracuse. Take care of those, look good against Virginia, and then we can have the conversation about whether or not that was really the turning point of the season.
Yeah, look, I think you're asking a lot for this to be a yes, because it means they got to go win at UVA. That's the second best team in the conference, a place you haven't won a whole lot at in the last 15 years. But I do think we said going into the West Coast trip, it felt like a defining point for the season. And after you go 0-2, it felt like it was going to be a defining point in a negative way. And I'm not going to run from the fact that I was as negative as anybody. I was as hypercritical as anybody. It could have been the best thing for them. And Carolina could be better suited to come out of this with their best player really wanting to take the season by the horn. So, yes, it is to be determined. I do think, though, that Carolina is back on the right track with the way that they played, the way that they dominated last night. Did want to, compliment the fans last night. Look, late arriving crowd traffic was a beast. We still put over 19,000 fans in the stands. And you got to compliment the student section. Of course, the topic of the arena is the hot discussion topic around the program, around the department, around the university right now. And I got a tweet out that's sent, it's getting a lot of run on social media, most of it in a positive way, some of it in a negative way. And it was just simply put, Dean Smith can be happy that his former players and his former coaches are the ones coming to the defense of the building that bears his name and advocating for Carolina to renovate, not relocate. It's something different when it's a student body that's, never got to watch him coach, never got to meet him, so on and so forth. They're the ones also coming to join the fight and really join the cause. I think this is it's going to be a decision that could send shockwaves throughout the fan base. This could be a decision that cripples relationships. Quite simply, I was sitting on Media Row last night, and if I knew the man's name, I wouldn't unveil it. But the man I was sitting beside was having discussions with another media member and chastising Roy Williams and Tyler Hansborough for coming to the defense of the building and saying it's not their place to make that decision. Well, that's the problem. Is there's a very good chance that the high-ranking decision makers at Carolina's University are going to make a decision that quite simply should not be up to them. If the former players and the former coaches are advocating for them to renovate their building, where they've won a lot of games, they won and competed for a lot of championships and created a lot of memories, and, oh, by the way, made a lot of money, then that's what the board should do. Is that what the board's going to do? That answer is no. We've learned the hard way. This board is going to do whatever they feel entitled to do. But it got me a little emotional seeing these students that also understand how important that building is. And the reverence that comes with being able to go watch basketball games there. And so I know if I was smiling, I know that Coach Smith was looking down, smiling as well. Let's hand out some gay balls, and we'll wrap up this edition of the podcast. I'll go first. I'll I'll go Henry Vassar for my game ball. The Estonian with a 15-point, 12-rebound double-double in 28 minutes. He was 6 of 10 from the field, 1 of 3 from 3, 2 of 5 from the foul line. He was the one that said after the game there was a different mindset, a different mentality in the practices leading up to the win. And as we talked about, I think Caleb Wilson is the vocal leader. I think Henry Vassar is the emotional leader. There was a lot, and I mean a lot of trash talking from him last night after some of the plays that he made, and that's a good thing. I love when Carolina has that edge. So I'll give my game ball for the win over Notre Dame to Henry Vassar.
Yeah, I got to give mine to Kyan. No, I'm kidding. Of course, who else is it going to be, man? Kyan Evans, you played well, but it's Caleb Wilson. I mean, 22 points in this game, 7 rebounds, 5 assists, just a tremendous overall game. Shot the ball efficiently, 8 of 11 from the field. At the free throw line, 5 of 8, which is, solid, not great, not perfect, but solid enough for him. And the good news is again, he continues to get to the line. That's the main thing that you want to see from him. Just so impactful to what Carolina does. And you can tell that, again, when you're in the Smith Center, and we've mentioned this a few times this year, there's just a different energy when he's making plays for Carolina than there are for some of the other guys on the team. Not that there's not energy, but when he has one of his moments, like he did last night with a couple of those dunks, the Smith Center, it's different. They get more energized, and I think he did that a couple of times last night. He did what he had to do on the defensive end of the floor, so credit to him. Really good game. I'll give my game ball to Caleb Wilson.
Well, that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the podcast. In the meantime, guys, we want to encourage you to visit the website, HeelToughBlog.com. Full coverage of the game last night can be found on there. I had the preview. Anthony had the recap as I was making my way back home from Chapel Hill. I'll have you covered this weekend with the Virginia game. If you don't know by now, that tip time has been moved from 2 p.m. up to noon. A lot of inclement weather is supposed to come our way this weekend, so a lot of games have been moved, but that means an early morning preview, but we will be back with the recap on that day. And with there no being playoff football, we will recap the game live on Saturday night, assuming that, we have power, so on and so forth, and there are bigger needs that we have to attend to. So we're keeping you up to date on all things Carolina basketball. Same thing with Carolina football. They can still add to the roster via the transfer portal if they were to do so. Anthony will have you covered on that front. And then pretty soon we'll be getting you ready for spring practice, which isn't too far away. So get to the website, HeelToughBlog.com, for the latest and best coverage of Carolina basketball, Tar Heel football. Ask for the podcast. You know where to find us. Every major podcasting platform, just search the Four Corners Podcast, will pop up. There, we encourage you guys to rate, review, and subscribe. That way you don't miss any audio editions of the show. If you're a video consumer, best way to keep up with us, like and follow the Facebook page at Heel Tough Blog. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Heel Tough Blog, or follow me on Twitter at HTB_Josh. The second we go live, you'll be notified. You can jump in and be a part of the conversation. With that, folks, it is going to wrap up this edition of the show. I do want to thank Anthony once again for hosting with me. We want to thank you guys for both watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.